disembodied voices. This could be something really interesting. That this, whatever this is, it's alive. It was really big, whatever it was. It was really huge. Hi, my name is Greg Ogles, and I've been into the Bigfoot scene for just over a decade now. And I got started in it just as a pastime. And I had brought some of my tools from my daytime job into the Bigfoot world. I'm an investigator, or really a traffic engineer who investigates crash scenes uh, or I used to investigate crash scenes. Anyway, so I took some of these tools from my daytime job and started to apply to uh, my investigations into the Bigfoot world. And in doing so, I decided to start a documentary. And lo and behold, several years later, my group and I came out with a documentary called "The Legend of the Downey Booger," and we're really proud of it. And we've just finished up principal photography on our second film.
Very good. And what is the name of your second film?
Second film is called Cryptic Expeditions, The Land Between the Lakes.
That sounds like a great film. Look forward to it. So you said you brought tools in from your engineering career into the research process. Can you explain what you brought in and how you implemented that into an investigation into Bigfoot?
Mhm. Well, as an investigator investigating uh, crash scenes, what you're trying to do is solve a mystery. Uh, so you take measurements and you uh, you make some assumptions first, and you take some measurements and you test these assumptions. And first and foremost, you have to document everything. There's several different ways of documenting. You can write them down, you can audio record, or you can video and audio record. And I prefer to video and audio record. So applying some of those techniques into the Bigfoot world, I mean, I tried to get real detailed whenever we came across like footprints, for example. I would get detailed measurements of the size and of the size of the prints and the gait between them, and just surmise what this creature was doing. Whether it would be walking or uh, being traveling on all fours or running, for example. So we are able to put together tales of what these creatures was doing when we came across trackways in the woods. So at first, we thought that, or at least I thought, that this was going to be a mystery that was going to be easily solved, because literally our first outing with my group into the woods, we were pretty deep in the woods, but we were there for about 45 minutes or so. And we came across a pond, and then we found this trackway leading down to the pond, and maybe halfway around the pond, then back up and out into the woods. And so we documented that, and I documented it in a very technical way. Um, that's a way that I would normally document things on a crash scene investigation. Very technical, very dry, and without any type of entertainment whatsoever. And upon reviewing uh, upon reviewing that evidence that we caught, I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible to watch. I didn't know that there was going to be so much to this making a documentary thing, which there's a lot entailed in making a documentary, because you have to balance what's true and also with what is entertaining at the same time. And you have to weave things in to make a story. And, there's just a whole lot to it. Um, So I took some of, but I took my engineering skills and my investigative skills into making the documentary, and um, it made it to where we could finish our first one. I know how to make a documentary the wrong way, which was our first one. But now since we've finished our second one, we finished it in lightning speed, and we know exactly how to make one now. And this second one is going to be fantastic. I'm so excited about getting it released now. It'll probably come out in December of 24. That's the time that we're shooting for, so that the film could be watchable. Now I can't speak to distributor times and things like that. So, but as far as it being ready to be viewed, we're shooting for December, and we're finished up principal photography, and we'll have a few more shots here and there, but nothing that's major, just connecting the dots kind of shots. But
Absolutely. And as a filmmaker, I can so appreciate your diligence in making a documentary. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than most
it
people
is.
realize to put that together.
It is.
So tell me, in your 10 years of going out there, and I'm sure you have, a lot of this in your films, but have you physically seen a Bigfoot in that process?
Um, Not with my eyes. Up until recently, not with my eyes. We had every bit of anecdotal evidence that you could have beforehand. We found footprints. We found handprints. Uh, we were able to gather casts of a foot and casts of hands. I found handprints. One of those outings that we were out early on in our tenure, we came across these bat houses out in the middle of the woods that the forestry department had put up. And these houses were on 4x4 posts, and they were roughly about 10 foot up in the air. Um, so we started looking at some of these bat houses, and we came across fingerprints that was on these bat houses. Now, I don't know if they were made by mud or guano or bat guts or whatever, but there were four fingers on one side of the post, and all the way around on the other side was the thumbprint. Now, I don't know if many of you know exactly how big a 4x4 post is, but it's huge. I wouldn't be able to reach about halfway around a 4x4 post. But, we were able to catch, evidence of the fingerprints on one side and the thumbprint on literally on the other. So something wrapped its hand all the way around a 4x4 post. Now, there was another time where we were in North Georgia, and we were on an expedition with another group, and they had a member of that other group had a really, really nice FLIR. And we were walking in the woods and came across this real hot target. And since there's a lot of bears there, we thought, there was a possibility that it could have been a bear. So we stood in our position for a few minutes, and then I thought personally that it was a rock, to be honest with you. And rocks give off heat. It's kind of late, very late October time of year. So we had cool surroundings, and some rocks were somewhat hot because it was a little warm during the day. Anyway, so we're watching this target for several minutes, and all of a sudden the target starts rocking back and forth like this. And I'm like, ooh, rocks don't rock. So like this could be something really interesting, that this whatever this is, it's alive. And then as it starts to rock back and forth, rocks and things start to be thrown at us from a different direction. And I'm like, hey, keep this FLIR on our target right here. If this is something that we're interested in, this could be just a distraction tactic, with the rocks. And the distraction rocks kept getting bigger, 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 until finally um, our target stood up. And when it stood up, I mean, you could see its eyes, nose, mouth, face, everything, its arms, its fingers. You could see everything about it. And as soon as it stood up, a really large log was thrown from the same direction the rocks and stuff were. And it kind of scared the lady holding the FLIR. So she like turned real quick to see to make sure it wasn't a bear or something charging at us. And then we could tell then that it was a log, and then turn right back and the target's gone. Just like that, just gone. Um, so that was a very clear sighting that I had, but it was through FLIR. And well, it was on expedition really just over this past weekend, and I got a really good silhouette of we were there doing our filming, and okay, we were there doing our filming, and we had just gotten there. Yeah, we hadn't been there very long at all, and we were actually getting our equipment out, on the back of the truck, and then all of a sudden you hear these growling noises. And at first I just kind of dismissed it. I didn't know what it was. And then I heard it again. I'm like, what is that? And some of the rest of our group where they were like, it freaked our one of our crewmen up. I mean, it freaked them out. They were terrified. They wanted to get out of there. And I'm like, hold on. This is why we're here. This is why we're here. And then the growling came. It went from the woods to our left, right in front of us, with right in front of our truck. And when I did have my night vision camera up and running at this time, and I'm trying to document everything, right? So I'm like hearing this noise coming from the front of our truck, and uh, I'm trying to get whatever it is on night vision, but the cameras that I'm using have a very limited range, and I'm torn between getting the reactions of our cast and our crew versus trying to see what this growling is. But there was one time that I did get a silhouette with my eyes, and it was really big, whatever it was. It was really huge. And this encounter was just incredible. It's going to be in our second film. It was the most intense encounter I've ever experienced. And we had our cast member with us is Adam Davies. And out of all of his journeys, he said it was the most intense encounter he's ever experienced. So we're really looking forward to have that sequence in our film. But to answer that question, I've had really good FLIR image, and I've had a good silhouette image. So have I had a daytime image with one in my eyes? No, I've not. I still haven't had that.
How about vocals? When you're out there, are you hearing things?
Oh, yes. Yes, most definitely. Um, we've got in our first film, we've got good vocals with I guess as we call it a howl. And there's lots of times where we go out and you hear that the chatter that it's hard to describe. It's that they're talking or something is talking, and it's very low, but you just can't make out the words. It's like oh, kind of kind of chatter. So we hear that pretty often. Whistles are very, very, very common. And the type of whistles that we hear with this group that we were investigating early on, it was just a real quick whistle like that. And you could hear them whistling back and forth to each other.
Do you
Um,
do anything to initiate contact or vocal
no,
vocalization from you? Just sit and you're just more passive in listening for that in the woods?
yes, that's usually they'll find you. You don't really have to do anything to attract them. They'll find you, you know. Um, early on, we thought that, you would have to do some whoops and hollers and things like that. But as we as we started to spend more time in the woods, gain more experience, we found that they'll find you if they're around. And you're their entertainment. They don't have TVs radios or anything like that. So you're their entertainment, and they'll come find you. And there's lots of other things that we've discovered on the way, like we've had lots of rock throwing encounters or pebbles, whatever it is they throw. Um, so we found that at least with the groups that we started to uh, hang around, if you acknowledged their presence, they would go away and you would never hear them again. Like if they start throwing rocks and you started looking around, see where the rock came from, it would stop and it wouldn't happen anymore. So we decided to do an experiment. We was going to ignore them. And we found that the more you ignore them, the more rock throwing you'll have, and the longer the encounter will last. So we've got to where we just ignore what's going on around us, and that way we're able to have some really good encounters.
So, give me an idea of how long a span you have sat there and just ignored them, and was there a progression of them, the action taken by Bigfoot around you as you sat there and ignored
Mhm.
them?
Oh, absolutely. There's times where we'll carry like a radio or something out with us, or or any other little playful devices. And it could be a light ball or a glow stick, just whatever we're playing with at the time. And we'll just be playing or playing music, whatever. And we've had experiences where, okay, they'll come up and initially you'll hear either a vocal or have rock throwing, and that will kind of initiate the experience, right? And we just ignore them, and sometimes they've stood around for hours, as long as we didn't really acknowledge them. And and there was this one time we were again up in North Georgia and doing the radio thing, and a guy that was with us played, I don't know what this song was, but I hated it, and apparently the Bigfoot hated it too. Because as soon as he started playing it, and it went on for a few minutes, it came a big stick and landed right between his legs. You just kind of have to be there, and it was really comical, that encounter, But his name was Paul Halsey, and to this day he carries that stick. He still has that stick with him. But those encounters had last for 20-30 minutes up to over an hour, and then eventually they'll just go about and do their own thing. And there's been times that they last for, I mean, the entire time we're there, but they're not really doing anything. You could hear them walking, but they're not really doing anything. And after we get tired and we walk back to camp or a car or whatever, they'll follow us for a while. They'll, I guess what people call it paralleling, and we'll walk and they'll walk and we stop, it stops, all the way back to the car. So, it varies. A lot of times we've had encounters that are brief, and a lot of times we've had encounters there that last a long time.
Um, and are there just certain places that you do your investigations, and how long did it take you to find the best spots?
Great question. Okay, and this is where some of my skills as an investigator came up. Um, we started looking at I wasn't privy to any of the Bigfoot reports when we first started, so we started looking at maps, and we started looking for number one, areas of deep woods, two areas that had lots of water, and three areas that had lots of game, food. And in Alabama, that's not too hard to find. But using those combinations, we were pretty successful early on. Now, it's not to say that we didn't come across areas that had nothing, because we certainly did. And a lot of, and it's not like you go out to these areas and you have experiences every time you're there, because that's absolutely not true too. It's only very occasional that you have these experiences. Um, but we kind of use deduction for finding some of our good areas. And later on, as we started to meet other contacts, people would start trusting us, that we wouldn't let out, the location area. They started sharing areas with us that was easier to get to, and not um, and not so obvious. What I mean by not so obvious is it'd be in an area that you didn't think would have a Bigfoot or something.
Sure. What about structures? Do you ever run across anything that you would attribute to a structure built by Bigfoot?
We do. However, investigating structures okay, let me kind of back up a little bit. Structures. On our first outing that are, excuse me, get a drink. On our first outing, where we found these magnificent footprints and the fingerprints on the bat houses, I came across this. It looked like a giant bird's nest over on, but was built on its side. And and I'm like, man, I mean, this it looks like a bird built this thing, but I mean, it was gargantuan. I could get inside it easily, and it was right beside a game trail. And we started looking at it, and we're like, man, I bet somebody could hide in here. So at first I thought it was a hunter's blind. But I'm like, hunters aren't going to spend days building this thing, because it was very intricate. I mean, just with these weaves and stuff, these reeds that was weaved in, almost like braided on the inside. And, we're sitting there looking at it, and we started looking closer, and on the ground, we found these magnificent footprints again and handprints. So we're like, hey, we think that, that instead of a hunter's blind, this is a Bigfoot blind for doing hunting. And sure enough, in that field, we found more footprints. And instead of the footprints being 5.5 feet apart like they were at the pond, they were they were 8.5 to 9 foot apart in the field. So we're like, okay, it's moving a little faster here. So it was probably in that blind and chasing something that came by. It's kind of what we thought. That was the best structure that that we came across. And another structure was one that was next to an overhang, and it was 3 or 4 foot tall, and it almost looked like uh, a protection berm, because if you approached it, it looked like there was like a getaway area on the other side of the rock overhang, that you couldn't get to from approaching the overhang. It would only be easy to get away going away from the overhang. So we thought that maybe that was a bedding area, or some place that of safety. Maybe there was a young one or something there. So however, after we started investigating the structures, it just took so long to determine whether or not these were naturally built, or um, naturally made, or if it was made by Bigfoot, or even humans or whatever. So as far as uh, our films go, we decided that after the first film that we wouldn't concentrate on structures too much, because we're essentially right now weekend warriors in filming, so we just don't have enough time to investigate all the structures properly like we did in the first one. So we've just decided to forego structures. But the short answer to this is yes. We come across structures quite often. Um, but do we don't investigate them anymore unless they're just absolutely fabulous. You know, it's just frankly it takes too much of our time.
What type of time consumption does it take to really analyze a structure of that nature, like the bird's nest looking structure?
Well, the bird's nest one was fairly easy because it was made out of the reeds, and you could see the some of the reeds were they were woven. So I mean that one was really easy. The other ones like they'll call it the berm, those take longer because first you look at the type of wood that's there, the type of material, and you try to determine if is this material, did it fall from a tree, or is it like real close that all it had to do was just fall over, or did these materials have to be brought in from another area, like in the berm area, where we're in a pine thicket, and the material that was there were not pine, it was other materials, other trees. And so they had to be brought in from another area. Uh, and there was an X structure that we investigated. And after driving there and analyzing the surroundings and the conditions, it takes at least a day to investigate large structures and to do it properly so that you can come to a fairly good conclusion whether it was natural fall made by humans or made by something other than humans.
So rather than just spend your time on the structures, you're really going to the heart of the matter and go where Bigfoot really is and get other more firsthand experience with Bigfoot himself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we'll look at a structure and determine whether that is a good area, but we don't spend time investigating them. We'll just look at them and move on and just kind of put that over in the category as an indicator. Okay, there's a structure here, so this indicates there might be something here, and we just take that and move on.
Sure. Well, you mentioned hearing the chatter, even though kind of a low rumble kind of chatter.
Mhm.
How does that compare to the Sierra sounds, which I'm sure you've heard?
The Sierra sounds, to me, are a little bit higher in vocals, the higher pitched. Uh, what I've heard was similar in the fact that you can't make out what they're saying, but you know that it's speech. It sounds like a foreign language, but what I've personally heard was more of a low grumble versus the higher pitched, uh, higher auditory, higher volume Sierra sounds. And I think there's a reason for that. I think that they were trying to be more stealthy around us because they knew we were there. And where the Sierra sounds were captured, Ron put a recorder out, to capture those. And I don't necessarily know that those Bigfoot actually knew that that reporter was there. So, and I think they felt a little bit more free to raise their voice and talk like they normally do versus being around somebody that, they're trying to sneak up on. And, I'm sure that they didn't want to alert us to their presence, even though we could still hear them.
The Sierra sounds also there's a lot of emotion in the Sierra sounds that it seems like
Mhm.
they're expressing. With the low rumble, did you pick up any kind of indication of an emotional expression, even though you couldn't hear the words?
No, to me, it was more militaristic strategy. They were say it was almost like, hey, you go over here, and I'll be over here doing this, and you go over there do that, kind of thing. Versus, they're upset with each other, like in the Sierra Sounds. They
Mhm.
weren't upset with us, although one time where I did hear them, there was a big tree break. That scared the bejesus out of me because it was really close. Um, and it was just, I don't know if you've ever heard a limb crack when there's no reason for it to crack and it's a really big limb. Man, make a lot of noise. Uh, so anyway, I've not heard emotion with it. No.
What do you think these things are?
Good question. Um, at first I thought they was just nothing but flesh and blood. They leave prints, you can hear them. Seems like they hunt. So, they have a mouth, they speak, they have a snout or a nose, they mouth and they breathe. So at first I thought there was just nothing but flesh and blood. And I never thought that they were apes, like some sort of great ape. I never thought that. At first, I thought they were a different type of human, like either, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, what have you. However, there's been situations where I thought I should be able to see them, and I could hear them plainly, hear them walking, but I couldn't see anything. It's just. And I look on the ground, maybe is it an armadillo or something? And it's not an armadillo. Um, so there's been times where I didn't see them. There's been times where I should have seen them, like where they're walking through some real thick area, and then you look and there's a small clearing and you don't see anything, and then the next thing you know, it's over on the other side of the clearing, continuing to walk away. Should have seen it, but didn't. There's been times where footprints just stop, trackways, they just stop in a field. I didn't have an explanation for that. So my mind is very much open to these beings being maybe interdimensional. They'll be able to come in and out of our reality. Um, Mine's very open to that. Do I think that they're flesh and blood sometimes? Oh, obviously. They leave prints, they eat everything else. But do I think they might have an ability that we don't? I think that's very possible. Very possible.
We have such a limitation of being able to figure out some of the things that we're experiencing with these. I understand that, certainly. But it leaves a lot to question, a lot of things we don't understand for sure.
Mhm.
So that kind of brings us to, those paranormal aspects with Bigfoot. And since basically the only thing we have to measure that by are our five senses, have you ever had an experience where there was a lot of noise? I've heard this before anyway, where there's a lot of noise and someone thinks that there's just going to be a horrendous amount of brush down and destruction in an area that can't see anything, they can only hear it. And then at a later point in time, go to that location and there's absolutely nothing. And
Mhm.
also, Ron Moorhead spoke of this out, thought the camp was just being, destroyed while he's in the tent. And then the next day go out and there's absolutely nothing has changed out there. Have you ever had something like that happen with you?
Mhm. Yeah, and this is kind of what I alluded to earlier, where you would hear something, you either hear something walking, and it sounds like it's just crashing through the woods, and you go out there and there's not a lot, there's not anything really messed up. You go out there the next day, you know, because we'd go out and try to find footprints, and I wouldn't see footprints. And I'm like, "Dadgum, I mean, this is such a mystery." Um, but yeah, there's been times where you hear a lot of stuff. Like there's been times where something like tries to run straight at you, and you're like, "Oh God, this is it. I'm gonna die." And all of a sudden it gets to the edge of the trail, and there's nothing there. You know, I say there's nothing there. There may be something there. Um, but I think I've got visual proof of what we're just talking about. And it's going to be on our next film. And I'll share a little bit about this. We were in we were in Bankhead National Forest, and a rock was thrown at us, and we're in this sort of like a field, and a rock was thrown at us, and I'm like, okay, action is starting to happen, and I take out my thermal imaging device, and I kind of look over there from the direction the rock was thrown, and I start recording, and I see an object, but it's cooler than I expected it to be. And there's something kind of peeking around some trees, and it's kind of moving up and down, and kind of like it's I don't know, kind of like it's like stooped down and then kind of sits up for a second. And I'm like, this is it's really close. It's at the edge of the woods, so I should be able to see it with my full spectrum camera. So I change out from my thermal to the full spectrum camera, and what I see, I pick up eyes with my full spectrum camera. I'm like, ooh, this is great. So I'm sitting here looking at this thing, looking at us, right? And this encounter lasts for quite a while. And at this time it gets kind of low to the ground. When I say low to the ground, I mean it's not like, a few inches. There's this tree that's blown over, and there's a limb of a tree that's maybe 2 or 3 feet up off the ground, and it's peeking up above the limb of this tree. Well, where you think you could see a head or the rest of the body, you can actually see straight through that image, or where the head should be. You can actually see straight through. But these eyes keep moving around. I mean, I actually catch them on camera ducking down behind the limb, and then they don't come back. So it's not, I dismiss that it's reflections of a leaf or anything like that. It's not that. These are much different looking than leaves are. So I did notice though that when I put down the camera, the full spectrum camera, I can't see them with my eyes, my naked eyes, but the full spectrum camera can see them. But it still can't pick up the body of what's there. So I think I've got evidence of that. And we're going to analyze it, these tapes a little bit further. But I'm really excited about that evidence and having it in the film.
Well, I think every bit and piece of a bigger puzzle comes into play as there are more researchers, more analysis, and looking outside the box may be real important here, because we're not possibly dealing with something we already understand or know about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's definitely intriguing about, what these things are. And what their connection is with the other paranormal phenomena, like orbs. When I first started this, I'd never even heard of orbs, other than pictures of dust. Um, but when we got out into the woods at certain areas, I started seeing these little glowing balls of light come floating through the woods. And I was like, okay, what is that? At first I thought it was just in my imagination until it started happening more and more. And I'm like, dadgum. I mean, then I thought, I started to go through this process trying to rationalize what I saw because these, I call them luminous phenomena, LPs, because these LPs were very bright, very, very, very bright, like as bright as a flashlight coming through the woods. And sometimes the encounters would be fleeting, meaning that, they wouldn't last but a few seconds. And sometimes these orbs would hang around for quite a while. And we addressed that at the end of our film where okay, at the end of the Downing Booger, we weren't able to capture anything on night vision. And I was getting a little weary, in regards to the film's length of time that it took to complete. So I was like, hey, look, guys, we're seeing these orbs. Let's go at least film one of these orbs and, we can get that on camera, right? And we'll at least have something. And so we're actually filming one of these orbs. We're in at a real high-end camera and it doesn't project any IR light or anything, just had a really high ISO. So we're filming one of these orbs, and of course it's in the middle of the night. And but lo and behold, when we're filming this orb, we catch something crawling on the ground between us and this orb. But it's huge. It is absolutely gargantuan. So we think that it's a Bigfoot crawling between us and that orb. And it just, if you haven't seen the film, it's really worth going and looking at because when you can see the arms and legs and the head in the middle and everything as it's trying to figure out which way to crawl to get off camera. But we didn't see see this thing while we were there. We did see the orb, and the orb just, I mean, it changes in intensity and it always stays the same color. It's always a white with a blue hue, but it definitely changes in intensity, um, uh, particularly as we're seeing this thing crawl between us and this orb. Um, but we have noticed wherever we see these orbs, we have a lot of Bigfoot activity. So we're trying to figure out what's the connection here. What is the connection between the orbs and the Bigfoots? So they're related somehow. I just don't know how yet.
Exactly. Some have said they are the Bigfoot and that they can be an orb or they can be, flesh and blood creature and kind of go back and forth.
Mhm.
But I haven't heard that too many places, just a few. When Ron Moorhead was, of course, up at the campsite, he saw the enormous blue craft on top of them. Have you had any craft activity or any type of UFOs?
Yeah, we have. It was one time up in North Georgia, and we have, and it was coincidentally at the exact same place where we saw the FLIR image of the Bigfoot. And we got great orb activity there. We had orbs that interacted with us there, and these encounters lasted for hours. But on one of the times we were there, we saw this beam of light. How to put it? The beam of light was extremely intense, but it went parallel to the ground. It wasn't shine from above down to the ground or from the ground up into the sky. It was like it was shined parallel with the ground. And the beam itself was very peculiar. It had an inner core that was extremely bright and very well defined and didn't diffuse at all. And in an outer core that was lighter than the inner core, obviously, but also extremely well defined and never diffused. Light typically diffuses over a period of, distance, but this did not. It was the most peculiar light I've ever seen. Well, close to the most peculiar. But I I would liken it to it was, and the beam of light was so big, it was bigger than aircraft itself. Um, I mean, the beam of light was actually very huge. I can't estimate its distance. I mean, its size because I didn't know the distance between us and this beam of light. I would say the beam of light was probably between 5 and 10,000 feet. But the beam of light was absolutely huge and only lasted a few seconds. But but yeah, we that was very strange uh, in that particular area. Yeah, and we've assisted in with the Meadow project with Trey Hudson, and there we've seen unidentified aircraft too.
Yeah, Trey's doing some really interesting work, and I think some of that with the box that they were able to see, but you know, not visually, but able to see kind of
And
in
clear.
the meadow or whatever, the field or whatever they
Mhm.
call that. Yeah, there's some really interesting research that he's doing out there.
Mhm.
What about mind speak? Have you ever had a sense that there's a communication of any sort that's more telepathic like?
I have not, not, not really. There was only one particular instance where early on it seemed like my entire life was flashing through my head. But after that, there's really been nothing. No.
Well, what else can you tell us? I mean, it sounds like you've really devoted some serious time and attention and analytical ability devoted toward figuring these things out and having, I guess, a greater sense of database about them. So, what have I not asked that you could talk about?
Well, there's been lots of other strangeness that we've encountered in our journeys. Number one, what we haven't talked about too much was missing time. Um, there's a one particular, okay, when we go out to investigate, we never go out alone, and we normally go out in pairs, leaving some people back at camp. Okay, so when we go out to walkabout, I call it walkabout. So there's this one time, a member of my crew, Janice, she and I went out on walkabout, and we went about a half a mile away from camp, and we're looking at these orbs, and then we come across this big, large, purplish looking ball of light, sort of a ball. And these orbs were like all around it. And we're like, man, this is cool, you know? And we thought we kind of observed it for maybe what we thought was 20 minutes before it dissipated. And then the orbs eventually went away. So we're like, wow, that was cool. Let's go back to camp and kind of talk about this. So we made our way back to camp. We thought we were gone 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. So, but when we get back to camp, our other mates were like, hey, what, where were you guys? And we're like, we were, or why were you gone so long? Is what they were saying. And we were like, we was only gone maybe 45 minutes to an hour. They're like, no, you were gone 5 hours. And we're like, no, no way. And but sure enough, as we were arguing, the sun started to come up. The sky started to lighten up. And we're like, dang, I guess we were. But what was so curious about that is that they thought that Janice and I were just out of firelight range talking the whole time. They could hear us talking in our voices. But in reality, we were half a mile away, not within voice shot at all. But they swore that they heard us talking that entire time, which is strange. So that's an area of high strangeness that we've experienced. Now, from my perspective, we were gone 45 minutes. From their perspective, we was gone for 5 hours. And I guess in reality, we were gone 5 hours. Um, so there's an aspect of missing time that we've encountered. Um, Disembodied voices. Okay, we've experienced that on many, many occasions. For instance, a lot of times when I address somebody, I go, hey, Janice, or hey, Brett. Yeah. And there was this one time Janice was at camp and she was getting things ready in camp, and I was at the restrooms. And when I came back, she said, hey, what'd you want? I'm like, well, what do you mean what I want? She said, you said, hey, Janice. And I'm like, no, I was at the bathrooms. So what she said, that she had heard my voice, in my voice, say, hey, Janice. And she said it seemed like it came from up under her truck. And she thought it was the oddest thing, you know. So we just sort of dismissed it, and I was like, Janice, you've been having too much to drink or something, lady. But until later on, I'm in my tent and I'm starting to get up to go outside to go to the restroom. And as soon as I kind of get up, I heard Brent kind of moving around in his tent too. And from a different direction, I heard, hey, Janice, in my voice. But it was a weird, really weird tone, you know. And I'm like, oh, crap, that's real. And another time, we were in North Georgia and Paul Halsey and uh, was at our camp and was on an expedition with another group. He also heard in my voice say, hey, Paul. But it wasn't just him, it was him and his whole group heard it. And I was away with another group. It was actually at the same time that we saw the Bigfoot thing in the FLIR when it stood up. So those two phenomena were happening simultaneously. So there's disembodied voices that we hear, and I've actually got one on camera now that's going to be in the second film. So we're going to address these disembodied voices that we hear.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting. I think I've heard a little bit about the disembodied voices, but you hear that by and large on ghost hunts or places that are haunted, things like that. There's a bleed through, it seems like, almost between, of all things paranormal, of course, but Bigfoot, the UFO alien phenomena, as well as the ghost haunting phenomena, just seems to have some bleed through, as if we're dealing with maybe somewhat the same thing, but just don't know for sure.
yeah, it very well could be. And we were doing a Bigfoot investigation, and that's where I saw my very first ghost. And when I say ghost, this was a full-bodied, very solid-looking ghost. We were at a cabin in West Georgia, and where we were outside the cabin, and we were having some great orb activity that night. Um, so Janice and I are like looking toward this cabin, and it's in the middle of this big field. And in front of us appeared this Indian on a horse. Um, yeah, I say in front of us, it was probably 20 yards away, 20, 30 yards away. And it just suddenly appeared, and it rode the entire length of the field, and it got to the tree line and then disappeared. And I looked over at Janice and I said, Janice, did you see? And then she said, an Indian on a horse? Yep, sure did. So I was like, dang, that's the darndest thing. Um, some of the other strange stuff that we've experienced, I saw my first shadow person or shadow being or whatever, when I was with Trey at the Meadow Project. That was interesting. I saw this shadow person kind of scurry across this field, and of all things, it sort of turned into an orb when it got to the other side of the field, or I think that it turned an orb because it went to this exact spot, and then a few minutes later, I saw this orb, and there was another group that was on the other side of the small grove of woods, that it was seemingly checking out, sort of spying on. So, uh, some of this other paranormal stuff I think go hand in hand with Bigfoot activities,
I think because Bigfoot does appear in so many ways, like you said, that
Mhm.
whole flesh and blood characteristic of it, we put it in the same category as any other, physical being that we know of on
Mhm.
Earth. But then we have these other behaviors that seem very out of character for anything that we know of as just being a flesh and blood simple um, creature.
Yeah, it's definitely perplexing. That's for sure. I don't know exactly what these things are, but I do know that they're very different from us. Um, they're very different. So
Exactly.
yeah, I just I think the journey is going to be long, uh, but I think eventually one day, everything I think everything is that we see of the paranormal will remain paranormal until we know the science behind it, and then it becomes normal. Um, just like technology. Are these things using technology, or is it some sort of natural ability? I think that remains to be seen. I think other people have seen things that are close to some of the things that I've seen. For instance, the Adam Davies story of him seeing the portal with the two beings coming out of this little portal is absolutely fascinating. And from his perspective, he thinks that it's some sort of technology that they're using to go from a different dimension into our dimension, or different universe, or whatever it is that they're coming from to our place. He thinks it's technology, and that very well may be. It could be just some sort of technology. But here, we've got cuttlefish and octopus that can change their color and their shape, and you know, jellyfishes that can glow, and just all sorts of animals that have abilities that we don't. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that these other entities have abilities that we just don't have. So my mind is very open to all of those possibilities.
Well, another theory or an idea behind this is time, that they're out of from a different time period even. And that goes back to the fact that you and your partner Janice saw the Native American, the Indian on the
Mhm.
horse. Was that from a different time? Did you feel like it was, where you
Oh,
see
definitely.
ghosts from a different time frame, but yet you were able to see it as a real thing? If it had not disappeared, would you have believed that it was indeed actual physically there?
Uh, if it hadn't disappeared, would I believe that it wasn't not
But
there?
that it was actually a person on a horse actually there, if it had not disappeared? Did
Um,
it look that real, is what I'm
yes,
asking.
it looked very solid. We went and tested it. We tested that theory. We stayed right where we were, and we sent Brent right over to where we saw it, right?
Mhm.
He went do over there to where we were. And as far as how the appearance of Brent looked compared to the appearance of the Indian on the horse was exactly the same. Uh, and Janice and I both concluded that this was a very solid object. I mean, you can make everything out. He wasn't wearing a shirt. That much I do know. He was wearing some sort of pants. I don't know the color of the horse. I don't know if it was a brown or a gray, or I still don't know that, because it was, it was dark, right? But you could make out that he was not wearing a shirt, and he had a feather in the back of his head that was kind of sticking up, sort of, or what appeared to be a feather. or there was something there. Maybe, you know. So yeah, if he had not disappeared, I would actually think that, you know, somebody was out there just riding a horse. Although it didn't make any sound. I didn't hear any sound with it. But
Even though the horse moved, you would have been within ear range of
yes,
being able to hear the sound if there had been any.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're 20, 30 yards. I mean, definitely within earshot of a horse. And I guess that's what was, you know, in retrospect, what was so strange is it didn't make any sound, you know. Um, so was this um was this something that we were seeing from the past, or was this another universe that kind of just barely touched ours, and we were, you know, we were seeing another universe, or we were seeing something from the past, you know, that is being projected into our time? I don't know what it was.
Well,
We were
exactly. I mean,
talking.
what made me think of that was what you said about Adam Davies talking about technology. But if you look at, you know, something back in time during maybe that period of time, if this was a Native American who was actually in that location at some point in time, probably not
Mhm,
technology that they would have had to project that or come bleed through. We think of
right.
that more as a ghost. But when we look at Bigfoot, you know, we don't seldom think of it as a projection or something bleeding through from another time frame potentially, but you know, but as we see ghosts, we always, you know, just assume that that is something that was from the past or so.
Hmm. Yeah, indeed. And like I say, with the missing time, you know, maybe there's pockets of time distortion around the planet that, you know, we just haven't learned to pick up yet, you know. You know, who knows how this universe works? All I know is that the more I investigate and the more I see, the less that the more that I know is that the less I actually really know. In other words, I know enough now to know that I know nothing, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. And that's what keeps us searching and trying to figure out all of these mysteries. And there again, the more you search, the more you have to search, right?
That's absolutely right.
Well, I thank you, Greg, for being with me today, and I'm going to go ahead and end our interview today. But much food for thought, and just absolutely fantastic. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Okay, thanks.